Hey all, welcome to the photography class. This lesson is going to be an introduction to photography. I decided to sit out here in my flower garden since it's really blooming like crazy. You can see all the blooms that I've got going on. Just a quick peek. I'm not going to take you on a tour of my whole garden, but I thought it'd make for a nice backdrop. We're going to be talking about our cameras, though, and what I want you to do is to go out, get your camera, and learn the buttons, the basic program buttons. And I've got two cameras here. I have my DSLR, which is here, that we're going to be reviewing, and I have point and shoot, because I want to make this lesson applicable to all cameras. And so you're going to need to learn your camera. And first, let's talk about how there's two main controls in every button setting. The first is aperture. Here are the buttons on my DSLR camera, and I'm going to share with you that there are two main controls on every camera, and one of them is the aperture, which changes the size of the hole down in the lens, and we're going to talk about that more later. And the other is shutter speed. And shutter speed is how fast the shutter opens and closes. Now on my DSLR, if I want to use aperture priority, here's my marker on my camera. Right now it's set to dummy mode, which is this green, which means I don't have to do anything. My camera's going to do all the thinking. If I move this to AV, that's aperture priority mode, and it will allow me to set the aperture first, and the camera will do the thinking on the shutter on what the shutter settings need to be. And this setting for TV is shutter priority, so I could set the shutter and let the camera do all the thinking for the aperture. Then I have manual. Manual is where I do all the thinking for everything. The camera doesn't do any thinking. Now, there are preset modes in most cameras, including the point and shoot cameras. And sometimes in a point and shoot camera you might not have this aperture priority or shutter priority mode, but you might have other things that affect the aperture and the priority or the shutter. And so to learn what these settings are in your camera and know how to use them, even though you don't have manual settings, will help you to become a better photographer. And so on mine here I have this head. Now these icons are all similar in all cameras, so once you learn them you don't have to worry about there's a bug on my paper. Hold on, I can't think while I have a bug crawling near me. Okay, there is a, where was I at? You don't have to relearn these icons. Many of them are universal. Now some of them are not, if they're specialty to just your camera, because they're trying to go out there and get you to buy their camera, and they want to try to sell the camera to you. But the main ones are all similar. This one here that is a head is a portrait mode. Now this mode is an aperture with a shallow depth of field, and we'll get into that later. This is a priority aperture setting. This is where the aperture is set for shallow depth of field so that you can get a person's face, which is close up to you, in best focus. And then the next one here is the landscape mode. And the landscape mode is also an aperture priority setting, where this is for a greater depth of field, so that everything is in focus, including things way out to infinity. And the last one that's an aperture setting, and we will have a lesson on each one of these individual later on, is the macro mode. And so it is also to get even a shallower depth of field than the portrait mode. Then you have the ones that are shutter speed. And in this particular one, my only one that affects shutter speed here, well, actually, I think there's two, is the little guy running. That's an action shot. That would be, so the shutter speed opens and closes really fast so that you can catch those action shots. That's going to be shutter speed. And the next one is a night shot, or it's actually, since it has a person, it's a night portrait shot. And these also are to slow down the shutter speed, whereas the little guy running fast makes the shutter speed go fast to capture it. The ones for night shots are so it will slow down the shutter speed, so it'll allow more light to come in at night time. And now I have some other ones on here. Well, actually, I think they're very similar. The DSLRs don't have as many of the presets, but if I can get my camera far enough away, if I click this info button, let me see what I got going on here. Oh, if I'm on the program mode, the P, and I click this info button, you're going to see this come up, and these are the settings my camera has for the portrait mode. Let's see, it's standard for every shot, and we'll go over changing some of these in another video. Landscape, neutral, faithful, monochrome, and if we go down, I can even use my own settings. So if I'm in program mode, I can get some of these same things. We'll go over that stuff later. But that's it for my DSLR. I'm going to turn on my point and shoot. And the reason the point and shoots tend to have more of these other settings, actually, there's one more setting. A couple more settings. One more. You'll have some that are also for flash, and this one at the bottom right here I actually use a lot because it keeps the flash from turning on, and doesn't have any special settings. But the point and shoots, here's my point and shoot, and we're looking at a picture of a picture now. That's pretty funny. This particular one, of course, doesn't have those AV and TV modes, but it has a lot of program settings that affect that. And if you see up at the top here, it says auto. If I change that to, oops, I'm going down, I need to go over, to scene mode, SCN on this camera is scene mode, and it tells me that over here. I can select that and then go down to the next level, and each camera is going to work different. I have on this one a beach and snow, and there's the little icon. And now the beach and the snow settings are going to be affected by the light metering, which is going to be another lesson. You're going to learn what all of these mean. And I have a standard snapshot, wide. These must be underwater, and my camera actually tells me. This is an underwater camera, so these are settings that are supposed to be good for underwater macro. Here's a pet and a cat mode. Tells me it takes a picture when a cat's face is detected. I'm not sure how that's different from a dog's face in the dog mode. That is definitely interesting to me. This one here is just snow, which is also going to be light metering. Here is my portrait mode, which is the same as on my other camera, which is going to be that shallow depth of field. This one says beauty. It says to create dynamic portrait pictures. There's my landscape mode that we talked about. Here's the night scene mode. So this is going to be the shutter speed that is affected in this one. And the night portrait. And so this is going to be shutter speed and aperture, because you want your low light situations are going to be affected by your, if I can hold this so you guys don't get dizzy, it's going to be affected by, your night is going to be affected by the shutter speed allowing in enough light, and your portrait mode is once again your aperture, so it gets what's closer up in focus. There's your sports, it calls it. That's your action shot. See, it's the same icon. That's also your shutter speed. And this one is indoor. This one would be a setting that is for subjects and backgrounds indoors. That's probably going to be I'm not sure. Candle. It says here it makes it warmer colors. It's probably going to saturate certain oranges and yellows to make those colors warmer. Your self-portrait, which is going to be an aperture. Sunset, that's going to also affect colors, make a vivid reproduction of reds and yellows. And in your DSLRs, you can set your colors to have more saturation, more contrast, and things like that yourself. But in these cameras, you have these special settings, which are kind of fun. There's one for fireworks, which is a slower shutter speed. Cuisine, which is still life, and it also affects the colors. Documents is the contrast between the letters and the background are set to best for documents. And now we're back at the beginning. So these are all the ones on my point and shoot. Well, that's not all. I actually have more. If we go back up here, I got this setting called Magic. And if I select it and go down, it has settings 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 8. And this one says Pop Art. And you can actually see it changing. Pinhole. And a lot of these are filters. These are digital filters. Fisheye. Yeah, you can buy a fisheye lens for your DSLRs, but this particular camera has some sort of filter or computer thing in it to give you a fisheye look. And a drawing, which is basically a sketch. We know about the sketch, how to make a sketch in our Photoshop Elements. Soft focus. Punk. That looks really wild. Sparkle. Watercolor. Shows you in the middle of the screen what it's going to look like. And back to Pop Art. And so there are some more settings. So sometimes you have filters in your camera. Even in your DSLRs, I believe you have filters for such as black and white. I didn't see black and white on here. this particular camera. Maybe it's somewhere else. I'm going to have to find it. And so the lesson here is to find out what your program settings are and to create a cheat sheet for yourself to keep handy with your camera at all times so that you can begin to know and learn what you have on your camera. And so I look forward to seeing what you have on your camera and comparing all the different cameras that are out there. I think this lesson might be a little bit eye-opening as we begin to discuss things together. So I'll see you around the forum.